friends. Good Monday morning. Today is Monday, December 7th. I'm Brian. I'm the pastor here at Christ United Methodist Church. Thank you for joining me and thank you for spending some time with me, not only today, but each of these days of December as we make our way um, through the Gospel of Luke. That was my whole point here is that Luke has 24 chapters in it, and if you start on December 1st, then you're going to finish it on Christmas Eve, the 24th. And we're on day 7, which means we're on chapter 7. So today is chapter 7 of Luke. I am reading from the Common English Bible translation. It's one I've been using lately. I think I'm going to take a break from it next year. I do. I try to do some reading from the Bible every day and completely read the Bible once a year. Once a year, use a thing, and I'll invite you to join me on that journey for 2021. I think for next year I'm going to change my translations, try something different. I've been using this for several years now, um, so I want to read something different and see what happens for me next year. Anyway, that's the one I'm using now, Common English Bible. Feel free to read your own translation, whichever whatever translation you normally use. Read your own Bible, follow along. I'm sure that some of the words will be different. Most will be the same or pretty close to it. Some will be a little bit different, and sometimes those differences can be important or can be jogging in some way, shape, or form. Um, I am doing this live, so you can comment on the stream if you have a question about something I say and you want more clarification. I will try to keep track of that as we go along. I don't always see those right away for some reason. I don't know. I don't know how Facebook works. Sometimes it doesn't seem to work at all. But I will try to keep track of that. I know today it's early. It's 8 o'clock. Normally I do this at 9 o'clock, but at 9 o'clock I'm going to be ringing the bells for the Salvation Army. But I still wanted to do this live rather than pre-record an update and upload it. That'll happen later this week. Again, Friday is my Sabbath day, so I'll probably pre-record Friday and Saturday because Saturday is my Sue day. Hi, hon. Anyway, let's get started with chapter 7. And yes, I will probably be pausing as we go along to give some context and try to understand what was taking place, maybe socially, uh, societally, I should say. Okay. After Jesus finished presenting all his words among the people, he entered Capernaum. Pause. And Capernaum is a town, a small city on in the northern part of Galilee, right on the Sea of Galilee, often considered to be sort of Jesus's home base. Um, Quite possibly was Peter's hometown. In fact, I think that's where they have a house that they claim is Peter's today. Um, it is one of the places I'll be visiting when I do my trip to the Holy Lands next October. So feel free to join me. Geography is always, I never really got into geography, especially in the Bible, until, I don't know, probably the last 10 years or so, maybe a little bit more, because I learned how important it is to understand things. So when you're reading some of the Gospels and it's talking about going from this town to that town, try to have a map nearby and see and look at the journey and you can learn some things from that. Anyway, so after Jesus finished presenting all his words among the people, he entered Capernaum. A centurion had a servant who was very important to him, but the servant was ill and about to die. Centurion was a Roman soldier in charge of 100 soldiers, hence the century. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to Jesus to ask him to come and heal the servant. When they came to Jesus, they earnestly pleaded with him. He deserves to have you do this for him, they said. He loves our people and he built our synagogue for us. Jesus went with them. He had almost reached the house when the centurion sent friends to Jesus. Lord, don't be bothered. I don't deserve to have you come under my roof. In fact, I didn't even consider myself worthy to come to you. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. I'm also a man appointed under authority, with soldiers under me. I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and the servant does it. When Jesus heard these words, he was impressed with the centurion. He turned to the crowd following him and said, I tell you, even in Israel, I haven't found faith like this. When the centurion's friends returned to his house, they found the servant restored to health. Pause. A couple interesting things there. Like the centurion, I mentioned the centurion means he's responsible for, he's over top of, in charge of 100 soldiers. So he understands how things are. He's got somebody over him, and he's over top of people. So he tells somebody to do something, they do it. And he's equating Jesus with that ability. He says, I know you have this kind of power um, over this kind of stuff, which is interesting because all of the previous stories in Luke regarding healing, Jesus is present with the sick person. Jesus touches to heal the sick person. This is the first instance, excuse me, in which Jesus is healing from a distance. Healing from a distance. And it's because of the faith of this centurion. Jesus didn't need to make a display. He didn't need to touch the person. He didn't need to be in the same room as the person in order to prove or anything like that, or to encourage people's faith. He saw great faith in this man and said, it's going to happen this way instead. At least that's my thoughts on that passage. Anyway, a little later, Jesus went to a city called Nain, which is a couple hundred miles, few hundred miles from whatever, from Capernaum. It's down south and west of Capernaum. His disciples and a great crowd traveled with him. As he approached the city gate, a dead man was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When he saw her, the Lord had compassion for her and said, don't cry. He stepped forward and touched the stretcher on which the dead man was being carried. Those carrying him stood still. Jesus said, young man, I say to you, get up. The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Awestruck, everyone praised God. A great prophet has appeared among us, they said. God has come to help his people. This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding region. Pause. Okay, so what was taking place here? Luke gives a lot of details. And when there's details, we have to ask why. Because sometimes the devil is in the details, right? But in this case, God is in the details. Jesus is in the details. The importance is in the details. Luke is very specific to say that this man who died was the only son of this woman, and that she was a widow. First century Judea, uh, a woman has her place in society based on who she's married to or who her kids are. A woman by herself really couldn't take care of herself. Very limited employment opportunities, um, very limited ability for her to live. Never mind thrive, but to live. Also, Jewish law, probably Roman law too, but it doesn't matter. Jewish law, inheritance only goes to men. So without a son, the son would have inherited the land from the father, not the wife. Okay, the woman wouldn't be able to own the land. So the land that they had, the home that they had, would have gone from the father to the son. To this one, it's the only son. Without a descendant after him, the land would go elsewhere. It would be taken over by some other member of the family, far distant perhaps, because the land should stay within the family, within the tribe. But she would quite possibly, if not probably, be left out on her own. So by bringing this young man back to life, Jesus isn't just giving him life, returning life to him. He is returning life to the mother. She now had a way to live through her son because he was brought back. John the Baptist and Jesus. John's disciples, now remember, John is in prison, right? John is in prison. His ministry ended. Luke was specific about that. His ministry ended and he's in prison. John's disciples informed him about all these things. John called two of his disciples and sent them to the Lord. They were to ask, "Are you the one who is coming, or should we look for someone else?" When they reached Jesus, they said, "John the Baptist sent us to you. He asks, 'Are you the one who is coming, or should we look for someone else?'" Right then, Jesus healed many of their diseases, illnesses, and evil spirits, and he gave sight to a number of blind people. Then he replied to John's disciples, "Go, report to John what you have seen and heard. Those who were blind are able to see. Those who were crippled now walk. People with skin diseases are cleansed. Those who were deaf now hear. Those who were dead are raised up. And good news is preached to the poor. Happy is anyone who doesn't stumble along the way because of me." So pause there. John knew somebody was coming after him that was more important, right? He already talked about all that, and he believed it was Jesus, but now he's not sure. Maybe because he wasn't seeing things the way they were happening, because he was locked up in jail, or maybe just because things weren't happening as the way he thought they should. A lot of people misunderstood the Messiah and thought it was going to be, this military mighty ruler and all that kind of thing. And none of that was happening. So for whatever reason, John's just maybe you need to clarify. Are you the one? Are you the one? Jesus responds by saying all these things that are happening, all these things that he's doing. And if you remember from chapter 4, when Jesus was in the synagogue and gave his mission statement, you'll see some comparisons. Some of the same things are popping up here that were in that mission statement. So Jesus is saying, this is what it is. After John's messengers were gone, Jesus spoke to the crowds about John. "What did you go out in the wilderness to see? A stalk blowing in the wind? What did you go out to see? A man dressed up in refined clothes? Look, those who dress in fashionable clothes and live in luxury are in royal palaces. What did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. He is the one of whom it's written, 'Look, I'm sending my messenger before you who will prepare your way for you before you.' I tell you that no greater human being has ever been born than John. Yet whoever is least in God's kingdom is greater than he." Everyone who heard this, including the tax collectors, acknowledged God's justice because they had been baptized by John. But the Pharisees and legal experts rejected God's will for themselves because they hadn't been baptized by John. So pause. Luke is very specific that the people who have accepted this message of a need for repentance, those who have humbled themselves and been baptized for repentance and forgiveness of sins, are the ones that are responding to Jesus' message and are agreeing with what's taking place, not the ones who were self-righteous. "To what will I compare the people of this generation?" Jesus asked. "What are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace, calling out to each other, 'We played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We sang a funeral song and you didn't cry. John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. Yet the human one came eating and drinking, and you say, look, a glutton and a drunk, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved to be right by all her descendants. I'm going to pause there. Um, what Jesus is pointing out is the hypocrisy of the people. You know, you're these children that called out uh, they called out a dance and played the flute and you didn't dance. And called out a dirge and you didn't cry. The hypocrisy of criticizing John because of what he didn't do or didn't eat, and criticizing Jesus because what he did eat and drink, and because of the fact that he was friends with sinners. The last verse, but wisdom is proved to be right by all her descendants. Wisdom in excuse me in Jewish literature is personified as a female, and if you read Proverbs chapter 8, that's where you'll really see that, and into 9. I think it's also into chapter 9, but especially chapter 8 is the personification of wisdom, and wisdom is female. I encourage you to read that chapter, and I encourage you in particular to pay attention to verses 22 to 31 about that, and see how wisdom is really personified in those 9 verses, 10 verses, however that 10 verses, I guess that would work out to be. And you can even compare that to the first chapter of John, and you don't even have to look at the first chapter. It's just like the first 5, 6 verses, and compare those two passages, see what you think about that. And wisdom is proved right by all of her descendants, by those who have wisdom, by those who follow the teachings of wisdom. And wisdom is more than just knowledge, of course. Back to the story. One of the Pharisees invited Jesus to eat with him. After he entered the Pharisee's home, he took his place at the table. uh, Pause just a moment, meaning he reclined at the table. He didn't sit at a table. Tables were just like 12, maybe 18 inches off the ground, and you reclined on your side, your left side, so that you can reach with your right hand, because your head is towards the table. You would reach with your right hand to eat, to reach your food. And even if you were left-handed, you'd lie on your left hand and reach with your right hand, because that's the proper way to do it. But laying down, often on some sort of a pillow or cushion, at least maybe. Okay, so that's his place at the table, reclining there, and he's guest of honor. And the table is probably usually set up in like a U shape, a U shape. Anyway, meanwhile, a woman from the city, a sinner, discovered that Jesus was dining in the Pharisee's house. She brought perfumed oil in a vase made of alabaster. Standing behind him at his feet and crying, she began to wet his feet with her tears. She wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured the oil on them. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw what was happening, he said to himself, if this man, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. He would know that she is a sinner. Jesus replied, technically it's not a reply if the guy didn't actually say anything, right? Because the guy only thought those things. Jesus replied anyway. Simon, I have something to say to you. Teacher, speak, he said. A certain lender had 2 debtors. One owed enough money to pay 500 people for a day's work. So yours might say 500 denarii. A denarian or a denarius was a coin of a Greek coin, a coin of the realm, and one of those would be the average day's pay. It would be a day's pay for an average worker, one denarius. So the one is 500 denarii is 500 days work. Okay. Enough money to pay 500 people for a day's work, or one person for 500 days. In other words, one person for 2 years. Maybe not quite 2 years, but yeah, year and a half. You're in three. Year and a half. Year and three quarters. The other owed enough money for 50 days work of work. So about 2 months. About 2 months. So 2 months versus 20 months. When they couldn't pay, the lender forgave the debts of them both. Which of them will love him more? Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the largest debt canceled. Pause. Interesting to think about how Simon might be answering that question, what kind of tone he's using in his voice, because the question itself is rather obvious, isn't it? Which one would be more thankful? Which one would love him more? Yeah, I mean, seriously, the one that had the almost 2 years worth of debt canceled, rather than the one with the smaller debt. So the one with the larger debt is the sort of the obvious answer. It's almost a rhetorical question. So is Simon answering very cautiously, like I suppose the one who had the largest debt canceled? Or is he answering almost sarcastically? I suppose the one who had the larger debt canceled, kind of thing. Interesting. Jesus said, You have judged correctly. Jesus turned to the woman and said to Simon, Do you see this woman? Pause, because Simon really didn't see her. He only saw her character, only saw what he wanted to see about her. He only saw her sin. He only saw who she was, not who she was. He didn't see the woman. Jesus turned to the woman and said to Simon, Do you see this woman? When I entered your home, you didn't give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but she hasn't stopped kissing my feet since I came in. You didn't anoint my head with oil, but she has poured perfumed oil on my feet. Pause. What's going on? Lots of cultural stuff, lots of society uh, stuff taking place under the rule of hospitality. It wasn't technically a law, but the rule of hospitality was someone comes to visit you, you offer them water to clean their feet. You're living in a desert land, very dry, very dusty. People walk a lot, step in all kind of stuff along the way as well. They don't have closed shoes, usually just sandals kind of thing. That's why when I wear sandals, I refer to them as my Jesus shoes. Um, so the feet are rough and dirty and smelly. So you offered them water to kind of clean and refresh their feet. You didn't have to, but it was considered good manners. It was part of the rule of hospitality. Second, the kiss. You welcomed people into your home to show them welcome, to show that they would be taken care of and protected, and that peace would reside there between you and them by offering them a kiss, on the cheek, one, two, whatever. And number three was the pouring of the oil on the head. Differences of opinion. Most likely, it's because well, they didn't bathe a whole lot. Okay, didn't bathe all that much. Again, dry, dirty, dusty land. Water is kind of scarce. You didn't just bathe every day. So, in order to help people not smell so bad, you put some oil on their head and let it kind of just drip down. It also kind of felt good and all that kind of stuff. Softened up this, in my case, especially softened up the skin. Okay. And Simon didn't do any of those things, but this woman, sinner, did. So Jesus says, "This is why I tell you that her many sins have been forgiven. So she has shown great love. The one who is forgiven little loves little." In other words, Simon, you might be a pretty good person. You consider yourself a good person. Maybe you haven't done a whole lot of bad things. So you don't love me as much as she does. Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other table guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this person that even forgives sins?" I wonder, is that how they said it? With contempt or with wonder and amazement? Could be read either way, I suppose. Who is this person that even forgives sins? I hope it was that one. Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." And that ends chapter 7. That's a good spot to end, too, isn't it? Go in peace. Jesus said to the woman, and I guess I'll say to you, go in peace. Thank you again, folks, for joining me this morning. Look for some announcements. I'll be putting announcements. I'm not sure if I'll do a video or probably just a posting here on Facebook later today for how you can help us prepare for our Christmas Eve worship service. Okay, I'm looking for some help, and I'm relying on you. So look for that announcement coming today, December 7th. Have a blessed day, and I hope this has been worthwhile for you.